This is one of the most extraordinary legal battles in modern American history. A sitting president is suing agencies of his own government for billions of dollars, claiming they failed to protect his most private financial information. President Donald Trump has filed a massive lawsuit seeking $10 billion in damages against the Internal Revenue Service and the US Treasury Department, accusing federal authorities of negligence after his tax return information was illegally leaked to the media. The lawsuit, filed in federal court in Miami, names the IRS and Treasury as defendants and also includes Trump's sons, Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump, as well as the Trump Organization as co-plaintiffs. The complaint argues that federal tax agencies had a strict legal obligation to safeguard taxpayer data and that they failed to prevent one of the most significant breaches of confidential tax information in American history. Trump's legal team claims that this was not simply an embarrassing leak. They argue it was a profound violation of privacy laws that caused lasting reputational harm, financial damage, and political fallout. The lawsuit alleges that the unauthorized disclosure of Trump's confidential tax filings was made possible because government agencies did not implement adequate security systems, did not properly monitor contractor access, and failed to protect sensitive records from being exploited. At the center of the scandal is a former IRS contractor named Charles Edward Littlejohn. Prosecutors say Littlejohn repeatedly accessed tax return information from IRS databases while working as a contract employee for Booz Allen Hamilton, a major government consulting firm. Between 2018 and 2020, Littlejohn unlawfully obtained private tax data belonging not only to Trump, but also to thousands of other wealthy Americans. Authorities say Littlejohn then leaked the information to news organizations, including the New York Times and ProPublica. The breach became a national sensation, fueling intense political controversy and sparking renewed debate over Trump's finances, his business dealings, and his long-standing refusal to release tax returns voluntarily. Littlejohn was eventually caught, prosecuted, and sentenced to 5 years in prison for unauthorized disclosure of tax information. Prosecutors described the leak as unprecedented, calling it one of the largest and most damaging breaches in IRS history. But Trump's lawsuit argues that the criminal conviction of one contractor does not absolve federal agencies of responsibility. Instead, the complaint insists that the IRS and Treasury themselves bear accountability for failing to prevent the breach from happening in the first place. The lawsuit demands more than $10 billion in damages, an enormous figure that highlights just how aggressively Trump is pursuing the case. His attorneys argue that the leak inflicted extraordinary harm, not only by exposing confidential financial details, but also by fueling political attacks and media scrutiny during a critical period of national elections. This legal action marks the latest chapter in a controversy that has followed Trump for nearly a decade. For years, Trump broke with presidential tradition by refusing to release his tax returns while running for office and while serving as president. Past candidates from both parties had typically disclosed their tax records as a gesture of transparency and public trust. Trump's refusal created a political firestorm, with critics arguing that voters deserve to know more about his finances, debts, and business interests. The leak of his tax information therefore carried enormous political weight. Reports published by the New York Times revealed that Trump paid only $750 in federal income tax in 2016, and very little in many other years, due to reported business losses and tax deductions. The revelations made headlines worldwide, fueling debates about tax fairness, wealth, and the financial practices of powerful elites. Trump has long insisted that the disclosures were politically motivated and that the media used stolen information to damage him. Now, years later, his lawsuit seeks to turn the tables by holding federal agencies financially responsible for allowing the leak to occur. The complaint argues that taxpayer confidentiality is one of the most fundamental obligations of the IRS. Federal law strictly prohibits unauthorized disclosure of tax return information, and violations are considered serious crimes. The lawsuit claims that if the IRS cannot protect sensitive data belonging to the President of the United States, then ordinary Americans have little reason to trust that their own private financial information is secure. Legal experts say the case is highly unusual because it involves a president suing agencies that operate under the executive branch he leads. While citizens routinely sue federal agencies, it is rare for the president himself to bring such a claim. This creates complex constitutional and political questions about how the government responds when its own chief executive is simultaneously its legal adversary. The lawsuit also comes at a moment when cybersecurity and data protection are major national concerns. Government databases contain vast amounts of sensitive personal information, from tax returns to health records to intelligence files. Breaches have become increasingly common in the digital age, and the Trump case highlights the potentially catastrophic consequences when insider access is abused. The fallout from the tax leak has already extended beyond the courtroom. In the wake of the scandal, the Treasury Department recently terminated contracts with Booz Allen Hamilton, the consulting firm that employed Little John. Treasury officials cited inadequate safeguards and a failure to properly secure sensitive taxpayer information. The decision sent shockwaves through the government contracting world, affecting dozens of contracts worth millions of dollars. The contract cancellations were seen as a dramatic response, signaling that the federal government intends to impose real consequences on contractors that fail to protect confidential data. Booz Allen's stock reportedly fell after the decision, underscoring the financial stakes of cybersecurity failures in government work. But critics of Trump's lawsuit argue that his legal claims may face significant hurdles. Suing the federal government is notoriously difficult because of sovereign immunity protections that limit when agencies can be held liable for damages. The IRS and Treasury may argue that they acted within their legal responsibilities and that the criminal actions of one contractor cannot automatically translate into agency negligence. Legal analysts also note that proving gross negligence could be challenging, given the complexity of modern data systems. Large agencies like the IRS manage enormous databases accessed by thousands of employees and contractors. Preventing every breach is extraordinarily difficult, and federal lawyers may argue that the government responded appropriately once the leak was discovered. Still, Trump's supporters argue that the case is about accountability. They say the IRS holds immense power over citizens' financial lives and must be held to the highest standards. They argue that when such a breach occurs, the government must face serious consequences, just as a private corporation would if it allowed sensitive consumer data to be exposed. The lawsuit also raises broader questions about privacy rights for public figures. Trump is one of the most scrutinized individuals in the world, but tax returns remain among the most confidential documents protected by law. The case could establish new precedents about how much responsibility federal agencies bear when private information is compromised. If Trump succeeds, it could open the door for other high-profile individuals and even ordinary taxpayers to pursue large claims against the government for data breaches. That possibility has privacy advocates and cybersecurity experts watching closely because it could fundamentally reshape federal liability and the incentives for stronger internal security reforms. The controversy also renews debate about transparency in politics. Many critics argue that if Trump had voluntarily released his tax returns, the political impact of the leak might have been different. Others counter that no citizen, including a president, should ever have private information stolen and leaked, regardless of political context. As the lawsuit moves forward, it is expected to become a major legal and political spectacle. Court filings in the coming weeks could reveal more details about how the breach occurred, what safeguards failed, and what internal warnings may have been missed. Representatives for the IRS and Treasury have not yet issued detailed public responses, but federal attorneys are expected to challenge the lawsuit aggressively. Motions to dismiss could be filed, and the case may ultimately hinge on whether courts believe the government can be held financially responsible for the criminal actions of an individual contractor. For Trump, the lawsuit is both personal and political. It represents a chance to seek vindication after years of controversy over his finances. For the federal government, it is a reminder of the enormous responsibility agencies carry in safeguarding private taxpayer information. And for the American public, the case underscores a deeper reality of the digital era. The government holds vast stores of sensitive personal data, and breaches are not abstract scandals. They are violations that can reshape lives, reputations, and even national politics. This lawsuit is not just about Donald Trump. It is about trust in federal institutions, the security of taxpayer records, and the accountability of agencies that operate at the core of American governance. As the legal battle unfolds, it could set new boundaries for privacy, federal liability, and the handling of confidential information in the modern age. The president's lawsuit is now moving through the courts, and the outcome may take months or even years. But the stakes are already clear. A sitting president is demanding $10 billion from his own government, arguing that the system designed to protect taxpayer confidentiality failed at the highest level. In the weeks ahead, Washington will be watching closely because this case is not only a legal confrontation, it is a political and institutional test of accountability in an era where data is power, privacy is fragile, and even the President of the United States is not immune from the consequences of a breach.